Farpoint Station was large for a frontier outpost, housing as many as 1 million beings at any given time. Much of this population was transitory, carried here due to its location at the nexus of shipping lanes that connected 3 sectors. Its designation as the administrative hub for the sector, complete with the headquarters of the Galactic Confederation Fleet for this quadrant, brought more structures, more beings, and facilities like shipyards and repair bays. It took tens of thousands of workers to keep the cargo and people humming through the station, and thousands more to keep its machinery running. Unlike many of those here with dark pasts or the ghosts of military service, Denny Pierre had no interesting backstory. He had been born in space and for the last 43 years had worked maintenance on dozens of stations until he ended up on Farpoint. He had always been a blue-collar worker fixing power coupling, CO2 scrubbers, oxygen and methane generators, and even the odd clogged toilet. It was the work he liked, the life he enjoyed, and probably what he would be doing until the day that he died. And then, in a heartbeat, his life changed. A small dragon-like creature sat on his boot as if claiming it for God and king. It was either the smallest draconian he had ever seen, the run of the litter abandoned as unviable, or another lost pet. Denny pretended not to notice, trying not to spook them. A decades-long war in the next sector over brought tens of thousands of refugees to Farpoint, and in the rush for survival, children and pets were often lost or abandoned. They skulked the maintenance and access tunnels, usually disappearing in a flash through a ventilation shaft or into a dark corner, and then she spoke.
"We hungry."
Denny had not noticed the little alien girl, no bigger than the palm of his hand, who rode on the back of the Draconian like a warrior princess.
"Well, it's a good thing I packed too much food in my lunch today. And you know what else is a good thing?
"What?"
As soon as I close this access panel, it's lunchtime."
"We hungry."
They rode on his boot the way toddlers sometimes did. Denny walked carefully down the maintenance tunnel until he came upon a dry, well-lit alcove and set his lunch pail down.
"This looks like a perfect place for a picnic. What do you think?"
"We hungry."
Knowing that Draconians were carnivores, Denny took the meat from his sandwich and placed it on the lid of a jar, which he used as plates for his tiny guests. For the girl, he was more cautious. He did not even know her species, and was unsure what human food was safe for her to eat. He decided to try a fruit bar and cut it up into small pieces that would more easily fit her tiny hands. As they ate, he noticed the alien girl was shivering. Space stations could be cold, especially in public spaces. He dug out a mylar blanket from his first aid kit and began fashioning a poncho for her. He cut a piece out, eyeing her size, and put a hole in the center. He cut 2 more slits for her wings and used duct tape to fasten the sides, leaving space at the top for her arms. The dragon saw the poncho and chirped, "Cold." Denny didn't argue with the little dragon. He simply took up his scissors and began fashioning a second poncho. Over lunch, he learned that the little alien's name was Ilara and that the dragon was Grok, although he was not sure if this was his actual name or merely a sound he made. Grok spoke only in single words, echoing his little friend whenever he chose to speak. Other times he made little chirps and croaks and meeps that may have been a language, but Denny's translator wouldn't or couldn't translate it. When the 2 children had eaten their fill, Denny carefully tucked them into the leg pockets of his coveralls, where they would remain for the rest of his shift. The next day he tried leaving them alone in his quarters. He came home to a disaster. The 2 little ones sitting in a tangle of wires that to this day he did not know where they came from. The rest of his quarters and every possession he owned was scattered across every surface. Denny set them on the desk with some food and set to work cleaning up the mess. When he was done, the 2 had curled up in the center of his bed and were fast asleep. The next day he brought them to work with him, riding in the leg pockets of his coveralls. He was a little stiff and sore from sleeping in a hard chair all night, but he figured he would get used to it in time. And so his days went for the next 2 weeks, with only his co-workers noticing the addition to his equipment. And then one day Denny looked up from setting up their lunch to see Alara leading a second draconian child to their picnic. Hrathgar was white, a genetic sport with stunted wings. Draconians did not waste resources on unviable offspring, and Denny suspected he had been abandoned. Adult white draconians were almost unheard of, as the coloring often came with disabilities like Hrathgar's stunted wings that made survival almost impossible. He was perhaps 10 standard years old, which made his presence remarkable. It also meant that he had matured far beyond his years, and Denny was finally able to leave the other two at home when he worked. Not long after, a third draconian was added to his growing collection. Aldrich was younger than Hrathgar, but much larger. Denny suspected he was lost rather than having been abandoned like the other two. A week later, a co-worker brought him 3 vulpine pups, 2 males and a female, that were found in a reclamation pipe. The vulpine looked like a cross between a fox and a werewolf, and would grow to stand 9 feet tall. Now they were bundles of matted fur, about 5 or 6 standard years old. Over the next few weeks, 2 more would come to live in his cramped quarters, a Valerian girl of about 12 and an 8-year-old girl with copper skin and large green eyes that belonged to one of the nomadic space tribes that inhabited the conflict zone. Humans referred to her people as the Romani, after a race of people on Earth who were known to wander about Europe long ago. Somehow, Denny found room for them all in his cramped quarters. It was hard to manage on his wages. His co-workers helped where and when they could. Someone was always stopping by with a toy for the children, or a piece of discarded clothing, or some bit of food that they had somehow forgotten they did not like. Once a medic came by to check on the children. She did not know Alara's race either, but she scanned her and made him up a list of foods she thought were safe, judging by her biology and blood chemistry. She found all 9 suffering from malnutrition, but otherwise healthy, and she left a list of foods and supplements for each of the 9 children. Denny looked at the list and sighed. Some of this was expensive, but like all working-class people, he had a side hustle. He collected and repaired the broken things he found around the station and sold it through the station's internet. And like all blue-collar stiffs, he had a dream. His was to one day open a classic diner, just like the ones he had read about and seen in vids over the years. The kind of place with stools lining the counter and private booths around the perimeter. He had been saving towards it for years, but now he had more important things to spend the money on. His family was an open secret amongst the working-class people on the station, one that had to stay hidden from management and the bureaucracies they represented. Like old Earth navies in the past, management did not like its workers to have obligations outside of work. They needed nothing to interfere with their people working extra hours as needed, especially now, with the upcoming peace conference only weeks away. The war between the Draconians and the Valerians was in its 64th year. It had grown to be a 7-sided conflict if you counted the pirates, raiders, and rebels. Those could be dealt with after they brought the main 4 combatants to the table and hammered out a peace treaty. The Galactic Confederation was investing a lot of resources to end the conflict, and they had chosen Farpoint Station as the optimum location for the peace talks. This meant that everyone on the station was working mandatory overtime, time that kept him from his quarters for longer and longer stretches. The older children who he'd been teaching to repair the electronic devices he found took up the slack. They also took turns preparing meals for the other children, although bath time and bedtime were sliding. As she got less sleep, Ilara grew more cranky, as 2-year-olds were apt to under similar circumstances. Her familiar refrain,
I will bite you!
chorused through their quarters. All the children except the little gold draconian bore the marks of her sharp teeth. Denny came home each night prepared to bandage wounds and resentments, wondering with a sigh why she could not learn to overuse the word no like every other 2-year-old in the galaxy. And then one night he returned home to find that some of the children had thought it would be funny, or perhaps safer, to teach Ilara a new phrase.
I'll punch you in the nose.
Well, gang, it looks like we need to have a family meeting.
Things got better after the family meeting for about a week. Bedtime became more regular, bath time happened once or twice, and he even came home to find the dishes done one night, and the week was about as much time as he needed. Soon the diplomats and other delegates began to arrive. Denny saw a draconian war leader, a hulking beast standing 7 feet tall and almost as wide. He wondered how anything that size would fit in his quarters, let alone stand upright. And the Vulpine were even taller. Oh, well, he thought to himself, he would cross that bridge when he got to it. The day the peace conference started, Denny was preparing to head home at a reasonable time for the first time in weeks, when his shift supervisor stopped him. Denny, there's a power fluctuations in conduit. J7, could you track it down before you clock out? We wouldn't want to lose power in the middle of the conference. Denny nodded and hitched up his utility belt. Power fluctuations could take hours to track down, but there was no point complaining about it. Even though he knew his kids were preparing him a surprise supper, such was the life of a maintenance worker, always on call and working while others ate or slept. Access shaft J7 was one of those narrow tunnels where he would have to crawl only inches from power couplings and junction boxes. These things wore out faster than other parts on the station. The constant temperature differential expanded and contracted the metal until weak points developed. In his lifetime, he had replaced hundreds and would probably replace hundreds more before he retired. He'd only begun crawling up the shaft when he saw it. Children and broken devices were not the only things abandoned by the beings passing through the station. Hundreds of obsolete robots and androids got left behind, and if not tracked down right away, they disappeared into the maintenance tunnels and access ways. Power couplings were their favorite source of energy. Because of this, Denny and his fellow maintenance workers referred to them as space rats.
Oh, no, you don't. Get back here, you little varmint.
There were 7 in this mischief, and Denny knew he would have to track down each one before they did more damage to the station's power network. All 7 had 8 mechanical legs like spiders, and they skittered through the cramped tunnel faster than he could crawl. Not that this was going to stop him from catching them. Tactics and ingenuity won out over speed every time, and Denny, like most maintenance workers on this and other stations, was an experienced space rat wrangler. Most were the size of toasters, but one monstrosity was the size of a suitcase, and the end of their legs were razor sharp. Tired of playing around, Denny got serious and pulled out his multi-tool. He switched it over to the plasma cutter setting and took 4 of the legs off the closest one. Now it was his turn to bite back. Denny crawled forward and pinned the cripple bot to the floor of the tunnel, setting his multi-tool to vibro screwdriver. He popped the access patch on the bottom of the bot and dislodged its power plant, pocketing the small cylinder unit before turning to the others. 1 down, 6 to go. Already his arm had been scored multiple times and blood was dripping down his wrist and onto the floor. By the gods, he hated space rats. While the smaller ones were faster and more agile, the largest space rat was giving him fits. The sharp points at the end of its legs were large enough to do real damage, and it spat some kind of noxious spray that hissed as it burned into the metal of the tunnel they were in. Denny ducked one such shower, then sent a stream of spray foam insulation out into the tunnel. The quick drying and rapidly expanding foam caught one of the smaller bots, freezing it in place. Denny kissed the handle of his multi-tool and grinned. It was the best investment he had ever made, opting for the more expensive brand name rather than one of the knockoffs. Like a Swiss Army knife, it had hundreds of tools built into one, with exchangeable canisters that kept the tools functioning again and again. He paused and reloaded his plasma cutter and spray foam insulation canisters before flipping the trap bot onto its back and popping the access hatch. One more power cell joined the other in his pocket. 2 down, 5 to go. 90 minutes into the chase, Denny had 4 power cells in his pocket and 3 bots to chase down. Their flight took them into a flimsy ventilation shaft that led towards the conference room. Denny could hear the faint voices of the delegates, but dismissed them as he concentrated on both his quarry and the unstable floor of the ventilation shaft. He wondered briefly if it would hold up under their combined weight. And then the largest bot stopped in the shaft ahead of him. It began to cut through the floor of the ventilation shaft with its sharp front claws.
Oh, no, you don't.
All 4 came crashing through the ceiling, landing inches from the Valerian ambassador, who was standing behind the podium giving opening remarks. The large bot was the first to recover, sensing its target behind Denny. Denny fended off one of its clawed legs with one hand as it attempted to crawl over him and attack the Valerian ambassador. He switched his multi-tool to his welder and fused another of its legs to the metal deck plate. A second bot scuttled towards him. Once again, switching his multi-tool, he selected his nail gun and shot nails through its optical sensor, blinding it. Security reacted, shooting the bot heading towards the Draconian war leader with an electromagnetic pulse, their weapon of choice against bots, drones, and androids. Denny rose, using his back to flip the large bot onto its back, 2 claws raking his thigh and leaving red divots behind. With his sonic screwdriver, he tore open the hatch on its belly, cutting the power cell with his plasma cutter rather than fighting his way through the forest of bladed legs. He turned the plasma cutter on the last one, cutting it in half in a shower of sparks.
Sorry, folks, space rats.
Denny collapsed, falling face first onto the metal deck. The whole sequence, from falling through the ceiling to collapsing on the floor, had taken less than 2 minutes. And it was all caught on camera, going out galaxy-wide on networks like the Galactic News Network. The reporters surged forward and were blocked by security. The security chief, speaking into his wrist communicator, called for a medic and issued orders. Get a security team and secure the hallway between here and the nearest safe room. Get in touch with the maintenance chief and find out where this man was coming from, and then get a second team to follow his footsteps. Sweep everything. Medics swept into the room with a hover gurney. They triaged Denny's injuries, quickly searching his pockets and removing his tool belt before putting him on the gurney and turning on its diagnostic scanners. On the way out, they handed the lot to one of the security guards. "Chief," he called, "there are 4 power cells here. It looks like they've been ripped out the hard way." "Space dust," the security chief cursed just loud enough for some of the reporters to hear. There were 7 Moravian assassin bots, and he took out 6. When the hover gurney passed, the reporters tried to follow, but were again held back by security. In its wake, the security teams began moving the delegates to a secondary site, one they felt was more secure than the main conference room. Through it all, Denny remained unconscious. Denny was a mess. Nanobots and stem cell therapy began to repair the damage to his organs, while the medical bed sealed his wounds with artificial skin that would graft to his own skin in time. And there were a lot of these. The medic overseeing his case counted 37 lacerations, some of them deep. It would take several days, even with nanobots, to fix all the damage. Not long after the delegates settled into the new conference room, the Valerian ambassador demanded to be taken to see the human who had saved her life. Not to be outdone by a Valerian, the Draconian war leader added his voice to hers, and Draconians could be loud enough to be heard over the cacophony of battle. The human ambassador and his aide, the permanent trade commissioner for the station, volunteered to take them. Outnumbered and outranked, the security chief relented, but insisted on leading the security detail himself. When they arrived, the ambassadorial party found Denny lying on a medical bed surrounded by 9 alien children. 3 were Draconian and 1 was a Valerian girl. "What's going on around here?" the Draconian war leader growled. When they arrived, the ambassadorial party found Denny lying on a medical bed surrounded by 9 alien children. 3 were Draconian and 1 was a Valerian girl. "What's going on around here?" the Draconian war leader growled.
If you hurt my papa, I will bite you!
The Draconian war leader blinked, not sure what to make of this. Something no bigger than the smallest claw on his foot was threatening him, all while riding a small golden Draconian like a war steed. It hissed at him. "She will too," the black Draconian child said. "And she bites hard," the Valerian girl added. "Real hard." "Where did these children come from?" the Draconian demanded. "And how did he come to possess this Draconian child?" "And that girl is Valerian," the Valerian delegate added. "Some children are lost and abandoned by the refugees who move through the station," the trade commissioner explained.
And someone has to feed them.
"But she is Valerian," the Valerian delegate insisted, "and should be with her people." "And the black one is Draconian," the war leader said. "How can a human possibly raise him to be a proper warrior?" "Actually," the human trade commissioner interjected, "they are all registered as Terran citizens."
I have those papers and their adoption certificates in a metal lockbox in my quarters. These are all my children, nice and legal-like.
"We will look into this further," the Draconian war leader said, "as soon as we track down the Moravians and make them tell us who hired them to kill us."
Perhaps a better avenue of investigation would be to ask yourself who benefits by keeping your peoples fighting.
"Oh, Papa," the Valerian girl, whose mane was ocean, cried. "You're so smart." "They may even have orchestrated the whole war," Rathgar said. "If we had access to the station's archives, we could figure out who has been trading the most in that sector." "Oh," the Romani girl said, "we would need Papa's big computer for that. It has a better AI than yours." "I could write an algorithm," Rathgar said, "one that could quickly search through the data for trade patterns." A reporter managed to sneak in a spy drone that recorded the whole scene. The story of the 9 adopted alien children spread farther and faster than the story about the attack on the delegates. People were taking sides, with some believing they belonged with their own people and others insisting they stay with this hero maintenance worker. And people were putting their credits where their mouth was, hiring the best legal representation for the blended family through a GoFundMe type campaign. Others began pestering their governments to do something about all the abandoned children on the station. It hit especially hard amongst human worlds, and the Terran Federation brought it up at the next session of the Galactic Confederation Parliament. Not all alien species were as cosmopolitan as others, despite their protestations of being civilized. There was a lot of pushback to the proposed Denny Pere statute. It had been scientifically proven long ago that there was nothing slower in this universe than the speed of galactic government. The debate was expected to last for months and the committee meetings even longer. Meanwhile, the investigation started by the children in the station hospital began to bear fruit. Aided by the human consulate, they tracked down suspicious trading patterns that ran through the station. 64 years ago, the war started over a disputed system that had no habitable planets. The largest of the 3 planets in the system, however, had large deposits of a rare mineral used in many technologies throughout the galaxy. A suspicious amount of etholite had passed through the station over the last 7 decades, carried by tramp freighters. Human and Valerian agents tracked these freighters to refineries belonging to the Kalathari corporate worlds. A delegation of Draconian and Valerian warships, led by a human contingent, was sent to investigate the disputed system. The station was abuzz with activity on the day the human dreadnought, the TFS Valkyrie, arrived. 3 miles long, it was the biggest warship in the galaxy, too big to dock at the station. Every surface was dotted with weapons ports, and its armor and shielding were beyond anything the technicians at the station had ever seen. It was designed to hold off entire fleets, and few there doubted that it could not. The fleet left Farpoint Station, the chosen rally point for the ships, and sailed away. Denny, who had returned to work, stood at a viewport with his 9 adopted children, watching with most of the station as the 2 fleets gathered around the TFS Valkyrie and slowly moved to the hyperspace point, a point far enough away from the station and its traffic not to interfere with either. And in a blink, they were gone. It was 3 days to the halation system. War Leader Korth and High Counselor Zeleth spent much of this time on board the TFS Valkyrie, where they met with Admiral Johansson to discuss contingency plans based on what they found in the system. "So," Admiral Johansson said, "we are agreed. Going through official Galactic Council channels will accomplish little." "And what do you suggest we do?" War Leader Korth asked. The Kalathari corporate worlds controlled much of the galactic banking system, as well as having cornered the market on 3 critical minerals. Registering a complaint with the Galactic Council, or even the courts, would likely take years to process, and would go nowhere in the end. "Something more subtle," Admiral Johansson nodded. "Something along the lines of cyber warfare, maybe arrange a few accidents in some of their critical infrastructure." "We Draconians prefer a more direct approach," War Leader Korth grumbled. "But the Kalathari fleets are large. War with them may not be the smart move at the moment. Both our fleets are in rough shape after decades of war." "We should still present our evidence to the Council," High Counselor Zeleth added. "Let the galaxy think we're following formal channels." War Leader Korth smiled, showing off his sharp teeth. "I always said you Valerians were crafty." "I'll take that as a compliment," the High Counselor responded. "Here's what I think we should do." Admiral Johansson leaned forward conspiratorially. "We wait 3 months, and then—" When the fleet dropped out of FLT, 5 patrol ships rose from the planet to intercept. As soon as the Valkyrie registered on their sensors, they turned, engaging their FLT drives as they fled the system. While human vessels were considered primitive by galactic standards, nothing in the universe outgunned them, and with 30 support vessels, it would not have been a battle. Mercenaries seldom stuck around to fight a losing battle. "Ensign," Admiral Johansson barked, "scan the surface." "I'm reading signs of life at 3 locations," the ensign replied. "Prepare our drop ships," Johansson said, settling back into his command chair. "Relay the information to our allies and let them know we will follow them in." Marines from all 3 fleets stormed the 3 illegal mining operations, capturing the facilities and personnel with limited resistance. Once their space cover had taken a powder, there was little they could do against the fleet orbiting overhead. Everything was cataloged and recorded, and the information was sent to the diplomats from all three species, who were preparing their response in the Galactic Council and in the courts. When the human, Valerian, and Draconian representatives launched their complaint in the Galactic Council, it raised more outrage amongst the galactic press than it did amongst the politicians and delegates in government. Little did any of them know that this was the start of a Cold War that would grip the galaxy for centuries. 3 months later, a stealth ship settled in an apoapsis orbit around the largest Kalathari aetholite refining facilities. When an explosion and fire took out most of the facility, later investigation found that a catastrophic software failure had led to the cooling system shutting down just as the furnaces were reaching their peak temperatures. No one suspected outside interference, at least not the public. Kalathari intelligence agents had their suspicion and took steps to counter this, sabotaging a human shipyard. For Denny, life had returned to normal, or as normal as life got, with 9 alien children sharing your small quarters. During the day, he worked his maintenance job, fixing everything from clogged CO2 scrubbers to clogged toilets. At night, he mediated disputes amongst his 9 young ones and listened to their stories as he bandaged bruises and bite marks. Ilara couldn't remain two forever, but some days it felt like she would. About a month after the fleet left for the Halation system, the Human Trade Commissioner stopped Denny in the halls. The Valerians and the Draconians had dropped their petitions to repatriate some of his children. "Stop by my office," the Trade Commissioner said. "I have some paperwork for you." That evening, Denny returned to his quarters with cake and ice cream. His little family had a celebration to commemorate the day they officially became a family. Sugar affected alien children, much like it did human children, and his 9 were full of laughter and energy long after his own had flagged. But Denny was happy. Several weeks later, a knock sounded at his door, just as he was getting the youngest ones tucked into their beds. A stranger stood outside, a Regilian, an insectoid being whose species occupied much of the galaxy's legal and administrative positions. He brought papers for Denny to sign, papers that came with a windfall of more credits than Denny would have earned in a lifetime. That fund for the legal battles had generated significant amounts, and after the legal fees had been paid, there was enough left over for Denny to move his family to a colony world. And of course, he opened that diner he had always dreamed about. It had the jukebox in the corner, the stools set along an L-shaped counter, and private booths along the walls. It was exactly like the ones in the vids and novels, if you ignored the 9 alien children who worked the kitchen and the counter. From time to time, a freighter would stop by New Caldwell, leaving behind a forgotten child. And slowly, Denny's Diner grew into one of the galaxy's largest interspecies orphanages. Paid and volunteer staff helped out, as did the 9 alien children from Farpoint. Ilara, once she learned to stop biting, became one of its leading spokespersons, keeping the plight of the galaxy's forgotten children in the minds of the public and the government. Denny, well, he can still be seen wearing his tool belt, fixing the odd broken fryer or clogged toilet. Some things never change.